They called it the building with no windows and no name. Locals crossed the street rather than walk past its gates. Guards stood at every corner, day and night, for decades, armed, silent, and unmoving, as if guarding something that could never be allowed to breathe fresh air. Nobody remembers who built it. Nobody remembers who ordered it built. But everyone who lived nearby remembers the same terrifying detail. People went in, and some never came out the same. A delivery boy who wandered inside by mistake was found 3 days later, sitting alone in a park, unable to speak a single word. A journalist who tried to investigate simply vanished from public record, his name quietly erased from every newspaper archive that once carried his byline. For over 100 years, this structure sat in plain sight, hidden behind fences, behind silence, behind fear that no one dared question out loud. What was hidden inside was never written down. What happened inside was never confirmed by a single official record. And what walked out of those doors was never quite human again. Tonight, we open the file nobody was ever supposed to find. We are going inside the one building history itself tried to erase. And once you see what we uncovered, you will understand why they buried it this deep, and why some doors should stay closed. To understand this place, you have to go back to a time when secrecy was currency, and silence was survival. The building rose in an era when governments and powerful institutions built structures with a single purpose: to keep something contained, controlled, or hidden from public view. It had no signage, no listed address in official directories. Even the surrounding streets seemed to bend away from it, as though the city itself had been designed to keep people from looking too closely. Those who worked nearby described convoys arriving after midnight, unmarked vehicles, tinted windows, engines left running. Workers spoke of men in dark coats entering through a side door that the public was never permitted to use. Some claimed to have seen crates unloaded that were far too heavy for their size. Others swore they heard sounds through the walls, sounds no ordinary office building should ever produce. Officials who were asked about the structure gave the same rehearsed answer for decades: it's simply administrative. No further explanation was ever offered. No further questions were ever answered. But administrative buildings do not require 3 layers of fencing. They do not require guards trained in specialized combat. And they do not require every employee to sign a document promising eternal silence about what they witnessed inside. And then, one autumn evening, everything changed. A single folder, misfiled, forgotten, and never meant to see daylight, surfaced in a routine records transfer decades later. What it revealed would force historians to rewrite everything they thought they understood about this forgotten building, and force us to ask why it had stayed forgotten for so long in the press place. The folder contained records of a program that was never meant to exist on paper at all. Inside those walls, according to the surviving documents, people were brought in for what was labeled evaluation, not employees, not volunteers, individuals with no public record of arrival, and in several disturbing cases, no record of departure either. The paperwork used clinical, detached language, the kind bureaucracies use when they want a horror to sound routine. Testimonies gathered decades later from a handful of former staff willing to speak only under condition of anonymity described long corridors lit by flickering fluorescent light, rooms with reinforced doors, and logs that tracked subjects by number instead of name. One former guard, interviewed briefly before he refused all further contact, said only this: "We were told not to ask what happened behind door 7. We didn't. Not once." Here is the moment that redefines everything. Cross-referencing surviving fragments against outside missing persons cases from the same decades reveals a chilling overlap. Several individuals reported missing by their families were later logged, under different names, as having entered this very building, and none of them were ever logged as having left. The full purpose of the program remains frustratingly incomplete, deliberately shredded, or classified beyond public reach even today. But the fragments that survive point toward experimentation, coercion, and a level of institutional secrecy so absolute that entire departments were structured simply to make sure it never surfaced. What we do know is this: whatever occurred inside that building was significant enough that powerful people spent decades and enormous resources making absolutely certain the world would never find out. Until now. Think about that. An entire building, staffed for generations, existing solely to keep one secret sealed. Not a rumor, not a legend. A documented silence, engineered by people who understood exactly what they were protecting and exactly how much they stood to lose the moment it surfaced. When fragments of the truth finally leaked into public hands, the response was swift and quiet. No dramatic trial, no televised hearing. No single person ever stood before the world and confessed. Instead, the building was quietly decommissioned. Records were reorganized. Several key personnel were reassigned to distant postings, and within a few short years, most of them had died of what were officially ruled natural causes. A statistic that, on its own, would raise no eyebrows, but taken together, forms a pattern too consistent to ignore. The families who had spent decades searching for missing loved ones received no closure, no apology. In most cases, no acknowledgement that their relatives had ever been logged inside those walls at all. The institutions responsible simply outlived the scandal, protected by the passage of time and the deliberate destruction of evidence. This is not ancient history. This is a pattern that repeats itself in different buildings, under different names. In nearly every country on Earth, whenever unchecked power is given a door that the public cannot open, secrecy protects the powerful far more often than it protects the innocent, and every generation seems to rediscover this lesson only after the damage is already done. Today, the building itself is gone, demolished, replaced by something unremarkable, something designed to make people forget it was ever there at all. But the records survive, scattered across archives that very few people have ever thought to search. And that is exactly how these institutions prefer it. Forgotten, buried, and unimaginable enough that nobody bothers asking the one question that actually matters. Who else, right now, is being kept behind a door just like it? Hidden in plain sight, waiting decades for someone brave enough to finally ask the questions that were never supposed to be asked. Every civilization builds its own version of this place. A locked door, a silent staff, a story too dangerous for daylight. What separates a functioning society from a frightening one is not whether such buildings exist. They always have, and they still do, but whether anyone remains willing to ask what happens inside them. Power does not fear violence. It fears documentation. It fears memory. It fears the quiet historian who refuses to let a folder stay misfiled forever. Every secret this deliberate depends on one thing above all else: our willingness to look away. So we won't. If this story unsettled you the way it unsettled us, tell us in the comments which detail you cannot stop thinking about, and consider subscribing, because there are other doors like this one still waiting to be opened. Somewhere, right now, another building just like it is standing in plain sight, guarded by silence instead of soldiers. The only question left is whether we will find it before it finds a way to erase itself again, the way this one nearly did.